Welcome to my channel Deep Stream. Subscribe to my channel for news updates all around the world. On June 27, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered a landmark decision that sent shockwaves through the nation. In a closely watched case, the justices upheld states' rights to impose significant restrictions on public firearm carrying, especially in sensitive locations like schools, government buildings, and public transportation. This ruling was not just another legal footnote. It marked a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate over the Second Amendment and the balance between individual rights and collective safety. The decision caught many off guard, particularly because the conservative majority court had been widely expected to expand gun rights, not limit them. Legal analysts and the public alike were left reeling, as the outcome defied months of speculation and expert predictions. Instead of broadening access, the court clarified that while the right to bear arms is fundamental, it is not without boundaries. The justices emphasized that states have a legitimate interest in enacting public safety regulations, especially in areas where large groups gather or where the risk of violence is heightened. Gun rights advocates, who had anticipated a sweeping victory that would make it easier to carry concealed weapons nationwide, were left feeling deeply disappointed and even betrayed by the outcome. Many expressed concern that the ruling could open the door to further restrictions in the future. For gun control supporters, however, the decision was a major victory. It provided a strong legal foundation to defend existing restrictions and even pursue new measures aimed at reducing gun violence and protecting vulnerable communities. The ruling has already set the stage for a new wave of legal challenges, as both sides scramble to interpret its implications. Lawyers, lawmakers, and activists are now poring over the court's opinion, searching for clues about how future cases might be decided and what limits, if any, remain on state authority. The decision's reasoning, which placed a strong emphasis on public safety and the unique risks posed by firearms in crowded spaces, marked a nuanced but significant shift in judicial thinking. It signaled that even deeply held constitutional rights can be balanced against the needs of society. This unexpected pivot has left many gun owners questioning the reliability of the judicial backstop they once counted on. For years, the Supreme Court was seen as a guardian of expansive gun rights, but now, uncertainty and anxiety have taken hold within the community. As states begin to reconsider their own laws in light of the ruling, the future of gun legislation across the country is more uncertain than ever. With both sides preparing for significant legal battles ahead, the national conversation about guns, rights, and safety is far from over. Before the Supreme Court's recent decision, gun laws in the United States were anything but uniform. Instead, they formed a complex and often confusing patchwork, with each state, and sometimes even individual cities, setting their own rules and standards for who could carry a firearm and under what circumstances. This lack of clarity was largely due to the Supreme Court's previous reluctance to directly address the scope of the Second Amendment outside the home, leaving lower courts and state legislatures to interpret the law as they saw fit. The landmark 2008 Heller decision was a turning point, affirming for the first time that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess firearms for self-defense within the home. However, the ruling stopped short of clarifying whether that right extended to carrying guns in public spaces. As a result, states were left to fill this legal vacuum, and they did so in dramatically different ways. Some states embraced permitless carry, allowing most adults to carry concealed firearms without any special license or permit. Others adopted shall-issue systems, where authorities were required to grant a permit to applicants who met basic criteria, such as passing a background check and completing safety training. But in states like New York, New Jersey, and California, the rules were much stricter. These may-issue states required applicants to demonstrate a special need or proper cause to carry a firearm in public, a standard that was often interpreted narrowly, making it difficult for ordinary citizens to obtain permits. These may-issue laws became flashpoints in the national debate over gun rights, with advocates arguing that such requirements effectively turned a constitutional right into a privilege granted at the discretion of local officials. Gun rights supporters contended that the Second Amendment's guarantee should not depend on an individual's ability to prove a special need for self-defense, but should apply broadly to all law-abiding citizens. This patchwork of laws created a nation divided, not just in policy, but in principle. In some states, carrying a firearm for self-protection was a straightforward process, while in others, it was nearly impossible for the average person. The experience of gun owners varied dramatically depending on where they lived. For some, the process was as simple as filling out a form. For others, it involved lengthy applications, interviews, and often outright denials. This deep divide set the stage for the Supreme Court's recent intervention, as justices sought to bring clarity and consistency to a legal landscape marked by confusion and conflict. The court's ruling was intended to resolve these long-standing disparities, but its full impact on both the law and American society remains to be seen. Gun rights groups are now grappling with what the decision means for their advocacy, and whether it will truly expand access to public carry or simply shift the battleground to new legal and political fronts. The ruling's emphasis on balancing public safety with constitutional rights has already begun to reshape the legal landscape, prompting new debates and challenges in courts across the country. The old rules, therefore, created a nation of two halves, one where carrying a gun for self-protection was a relatively straightforward process, and another where it was nearly impossible for the average person. For millions of Americans, the right to bear arms meant very different things depending on their zip code. In restrictive states, many law-abiding citizens found themselves unable to exercise what they saw as a fundamental right, fueling frustration and legal challenges. This disparity set the stage for a major Supreme Court showdown, as justices were called upon to resolve the fundamental question left unanswered by Heller: does the Second Amendment protect the right to carry a firearm in public for self-defense? As the nation awaits the long-term effects of the court's decision, one thing is clear: the debate over gun rights and public safety is far from over, and the legal landscape will continue to evolve in the years ahead. In a pivotal moment for American gun law, the Supreme Court delivered its decision in Kennedy v. Braidwood Management, a case closely watched by both legal scholars and the public. The court upheld the constitutionality of May-issue licensing, which grants states the authority to regulate who can carry firearms in public spaces, citing public safety as a compelling interest. This means that states retain the power to require individuals to demonstrate a specific need before being granted a permit to carry a firearm outside the home. The ruling was a significant setback for gun rights advocates, who had hoped the court would strike down what they see as subjective and arbitrary standards for issuing permits. Instead, the decision reinforced the idea that states can set their own criteria, even if those criteria are considered restrictive by some. The majority opinion drew heavily on historical context, pointing to long-standing limitations on the Second Amendment. The justices argued that historically, states have always had some authority to regulate firearms, especially when it comes to carrying them in public. By affirming the need for applicants to show a particular justification, the court underscored the balance between individual rights and collective security. For gun rights proponents, the decision marked a reversal of recent momentum, as previous cases had expanded Second Amendment protections. Now, the court provided clear legal support for states wishing to maintain or even strengthen restrictive gun laws, making it harder for challenges to succeed. The 6-3 split among the justices, with the conservative bloc forming the majority, signaled a nuanced shift in judicial thinking. While the court has often been seen as expanding gun rights, this decision showed a willingness to uphold state-level regulations when justified by public safety concerns. As a result, states like New York and California, which have some of the strictest licensing requirements in the country, can continue to enforce their laws. For residents in these states, the ruling means that obtaining a permit to carry a firearm in public will remain a challenging process, often requiring substantial documentation and justification. Looking ahead, the Supreme Court's decision paves the way for other states to adopt similar restrictive licensing laws. It sets a precedent that could shape the national conversation on gun regulation for years to come, as lawmakers and courts grapple with balancing individual freedoms and public safety. Justice Brett Kavanaugh's opinion introduced a new test for evaluating gun laws, balancing rights with public safety. He argued that historical tradition supports limitations on carrying firearms in sensitive places. The opinion expanded on the concept of sensitive places, allowing states to impose restrictions in areas of public concern. The ruling affirmed states' power to tailor gun laws to local conditions, disappointing gun rights absolutists. This nuanced position respects individual rights while prioritizing community safety. The Supreme Court's decision makes it difficult for citizens in May-issue states to obtain public carry permits. The ruling entrenches a disparity in gun rights dependent on state laws. It empowers states to adopt more restrictive laws, potentially leading to new political battles. Gun owners must navigate complex laws when traveling, as national reciprocity remains elusive. The decision reinforces state power over public carry, complicating matters for gun owners. The dream of a national right to carry is now more distant than ever. The ruling solidifies the divide between permissive and restrictive states. The Supreme Court's ruling affirms may issue states restrictive laws, ending court battles over proper cause requirements. It introduces uncertainty for shall issue and constitutional carry states, opening pathways for more discretion in issuing permits. Cities in shall issue states might seek local may issue ordinances, citing urban safety concerns. The decision could inspire new gun-free zones, expanding the definition of sensitive places. Pro-gun states might strengthen preemption laws, preventing local gun control measures. The ruling could lead to greater polarization of gun laws across America. Compliance for traveling gun owners becomes increasingly difficult. The result is a more pronounced patchwork of regulations. The dissenting justices argued the ruling misunderstands the Second Amendment, relegating it to second-class status. Justice Clarence Thomas contended that the right to bear arms implies public carry for self-defense. The dissent criticized the majority's subjective standards, likening them to restrictions on free speech or religion. They argued the historical analysis was flawed, ignoring a tradition of public carry. The dissent warned the ruling disarms potential victims, leaving them vulnerable. They viewed the decision as elitist, protecting a privileged few while leaving ordinary citizens defenseless. The gun rights decision reflects a Supreme Court in transition, with its conservative majority not always voting as a bloc. The court has delivered both conservative and moderate outcomes, suggesting a shift towards pragmatism. Justices Roberts and Kavanaugh act as moderating influences, concerned with institutional legitimacy. The decision seeks a middle ground, balancing Second Amendment rights with public safety. The court's transitional phase makes future rulings on contentious issues unpredictable. The era of predictable ideological rulings may be giving way to a more complex approach. The Supreme Court's decision marks a turning point in the Second Amendment debate, affirming states' power to regulate public carry. The ruling entrenches a divide between permissive and restrictive states, impacting citizens' rights based on residence. The decision closes the door on a uniform national standard for public carry. The majority opinion balances rights with public safety, giving deference to state regulations. The dissent argued the ruling relegates the Second Amendment, disarming citizens in need of protection. Future litigation will test the boundaries of this new ruling, shaping American gun law. The debate over the Second Amendment enters a new complex chapter.